Big book breakdown with Karen. How are you? Oh my gosh, it's been a little while. I'm sorry for the delay. I just got another group of people through the 12 steps, and we do it as a group, and it was a fantastic 12-step group, and congratulations to all of those people that finished their steps in 2 weeks. It was fantastic. I started doing that during the pandemic, and it has turned out to be a real boon for people's sobriety. So thank you for being patient. I'm going to start with There Is a Solution, Chapter 2. As you know, I started in the very beginning in the preface. We are now on Chapter 2, There Is a Solution, page 17. Okay, grab a big book, follow along. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix, but there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go in our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. But that in itself would have never held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way that no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes an annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase this list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss this situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he's talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except a sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our prospective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. If we keep on the way we're going, there is little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given to us? We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume, Alcoholics Anonymous, setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us as much as to write a book in which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. It's an important line. That's on top of page 20. You may have already asked yourself, why is it that all of us became so very ill from drinking? Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may be already asking, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We should tell you what we have done. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we have seen them. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have the certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Here's the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd and incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at just the exact wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement must be kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up the bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls down the structure on his head by a senseless series of sprees. Boy, I relate to that. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep around the clock. Yet early the next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw it down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he sometimes still displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions may vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer this riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, I'm going to read that again. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who's having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took the first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once his malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize in a vague way, that their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. The tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it's suspected. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. Okay, I'm going to stop right there and I want to talk about it. It's a frickin' powerful chapter. If you are struggling with alcoholism, this probably blew your mind, right? It's your life on paper. So I want to go back a little bit. Wherever there's squiggly lines, you really need to pay attention. So back on page 18, there's a paragraph here with squiggly lines, italicized. But the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, meaning the solution we have in this book, who is properly armed with the facts about himself can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, nothing or little can be accomplished. Meaning, you can go to a therapist, you can go to doctors, you can go to your wife, you can go to your husband, you can go to your parents, and if they are not alcoholic and they cannot relate, it kind of is worthless. It's just pointless. One alcoholic talking to another alcoholic seems to work. That's the reason I'm talking to you. I have the experience. I know what you're feeling, right? When I read this, every time I read it, I get like chills because it's me. Okay, so another part that's very important. This part on 20, I kind of stopped there. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help their needs. Underline that. That is the 12th step. That is the root of our problem. Okay? Then if you go on this part right here on 24 that I just read, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower has practically become non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring our consciousness the sufficient force of the memory of the suffering. That's called the mental blank spot they talk about. When you just find yourself drinking and you didn't even think about like what it was like before. The most important thing they talk about here, that this is, let me see, right here on page 23. The observation would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. This explains everything. Here, I need to mark where we left off. I'm going to pick up on page 24 next time, but I want to really explain this. People think it's the alcohol. It's not the alcohol, it's not the drugs, it's not the gambling. When I relapsed, I had been sober for like 14 years, and relapsing was the worst thing I'd ever done in my life. It was the worst decision I ever made. Now, I would like to think that all the decisions I've made in my life, bad ones, were when I was drunk. I made terrible, terrible decisions. I had terrible ideas when I was drinking. But when I was sober, 14 years sober, I made the worst decision ever, and that was to drink again. I was sober when I did that. If you knew why I quit, you would never start again. See, that's the insanity of the thinking. That's the part you gotta fix. That's the part we need help with. The thinking of the alcoholic is baffling. Only another alcoholic understands it. You know, it's the reason I can help people, is I think like an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic. I don't drink anymore, but I have the thinking of an alcoholic. I have the mental health issues of an alcoholic. I just don't treat it with alcohol and drugs anymore. I found a better way to treat it, but it has to be treated. See, people think this is a body thing. If I just don't drink, I'm going to be okay. Not true. Not true. I love this. I want you to take some time until I read the next part next week and reread that. Underline. Mark it up. Contact me. Let's talk about it. That is so interesting, isn't it? You should be so hopeful. Not about the parts where it says we're doomed. That's not hopeful. What's hopeful is if you know what's wrong with you, you will understand why you have to treat it. If it's the mind, your mind's not gone anywhere. It doesn't magically change just because you quit drinking. It means it's scouting out something new. It's figuring out another way around. Very smart. Deadly, this kind of thinking. So join me next week. Let's do the second part of There Is a Solution out of the big book and do a breakdown on it. Let's make sure you understand what it's saying, because it will save your life. I have these recorded. They are available on YouTube if you want to go back and start at the beginning. If you want to watch them on IGTV on Instagram, you're more than welcome to. There is also a button to support my work in the link if you would like to do that and help me spread the word. Okay? Have a great day. Bye, guys.